California suburbia has a rhythm all its own. The mornings start with the soft hiss of sprinklers watering emerald lawns, the whine of leaf blowers cutting across cul-de-sacs, and the distant rumble of garbage trucks making their way through planned communities like clockwork. By mid-afternoon, the sun bakes the concrete driveways until they shimmer, and the sidewalks lie empty except for the occasional jogger or a kid riding a scooter back from school. It was in this predictable environment, surrounded by homes that looked like variations of the same model house, that the idea of a little free library first took root in my mind. I'd seen them before, those tiny wooden boxes mounted on posts, with a glass door revealing shelves of donated books. They always caught my eye when I passed them in other neighborhoods. Some looked like miniature houses themselves, complete with little shingled roofs and cheerful paint. Others were simpler, just weatherproof cabinets filled with paperbacks and children's stories. There was something almost magical about them, an invitation to pause, to browse, to share. Our neighborhood, despite its manicured appearance, felt strangely sterile. People waved politely when walking their dogs or checking the mail, but conversations rarely lasted more than a few words. Kids played inside more than outside, glued to tablets or video games. The sidewalks were immaculate yet lifeless. I thought a little free library could change that. Something small, simple, but human. A reason for neighbors to stop, to linger, to connect. Blank. Blank. The seed of the idea sprouted one Saturday morning while I was cleaning out the garage. In the corner sat an old wooden cabinet we hadn't used in years. It was sturdy, real wood, polished to a warm honey color. A single glass door revealed two deep shelves inside. My wife had once used it to store teacups, but now it was just gathering dust. "What about turning this into a little free library?" I asked her, half joking. She glanced over from sorting boxes. "That cabinet? It's too nice to toss out. A library's actually a good idea. The neighborhood could use something like that." That was all the encouragement I needed. By the afternoon, I had wiped it down, checked the hinges, and given it a light coat of sealant to weatherproof it. I imagined it filled with paperbacks, mystery novels, kids' picture books, maybe even cookbooks or self-help guides. Something for everyone. Blank. When I first set it out at the edge of our driveway, I wasn't sure what to expect. I added a simple sign, "Little Free Library," and stocked the shelves with a handful of books we no longer needed. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, a well-worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a couple of thrillers by John Grisham, and a stack of children's picture books my kids had outgrown. At first, it felt almost silly. Who would actually stop? But within a few days, I noticed changes. One afternoon, a mother walking with her daughter stopped at the cabinet. I watched from the porch as the little girl pressed her nose to the glass, peering in with excitement. The mother opened the door, and the child carefully pulled out a picture book with wide eyes. She carried it away as if she'd just discovered treasure. Another evening, I spotted Carl, a retiree from down the street, flipping through one of the thrillers. He looked up, saw me, and gave a wave. "Nice idea," he called. Even kids on bikes began to pause, hopping off to see what titles were inside. A week later, I noticed new books appear, ones I hadn't placed there. Someone had contributed a cookbook, a volume of poetry, even a Spanish-English dictionary. The cabinet was already becoming a living thing, growing with each exchange. Blank. For the first time since moving here, I felt like the neighborhood was coming alive. Conversations started happening in front of my house. People lingered, talking about books, about the weather, about anything at all. Parents used it as an excuse to take evening walks with their kids. It wasn't just a library, it was a spark. And selfishly, it made me proud. Proud that something as small as a repurposed cabinet could shift the tone of an entire street. Proud that I had done something, however minor, that made people smile. Blank, underscore, blank, of course, in the back of my mind, I knew there might be rules. This was, after all, an HOA community. Our CC and Rs covered everything from lawn height to acceptable fence colors. But when I skimmed the documents, I didn't see anything that explicitly prohibited a little free library. Driveways weren't mentioned as common areas. Additions were defined as permanent structures, fences, sheds, patios. My cabinet was none of those things. Besides, who could object to something so harmless? A wooden box of books wasn't hurting anyone. Or so I thought. Blank, underscore, blank, one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, I sat on the porch watching a neighbor browse the library. It felt like everything I'd hoped for was coming true. But just as the neighbor walked away with a paperback in hand, a white SUV pulled slowly up to the curb. The window rolled down, and I recognized the face immediately. A member of the architectural committee. Her eyes locked on the cabinet. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She pulled the car to a stop, stepped out, and began striding toward my driveway with the stiff posture of someone on official business. The warmth I'd been feeling drained instantly. My wife stepped out behind me, sensing the tension. The committee member stopped at the edge of the driveway, crossed her arms, and said in a tone dripping with disdain, "What is this supposed to be? What is this supposed to be?" She repeated, her voice so flat it seemed to iron the warmth out of the evening air. I stood, palms open. "It's a little free library," I said. "A community book box. It's a repurposed cabinet, wood, glass door, weatherproofed. Neighbors have been using it. Kids love it." She looked at the cabinet the way one might look at a raccoon rifling through a picnic basket. "This is not approved. This is an addition on a common area," she said crisply, as if reading from a cue card. "You'll need to remove it. Immediately." "The driveway?" I asked, careful to keep my tone even. "That's not a common area. It's part of my lot." She snorted. "It's visible from the street. That makes it a common aesthetic interest. Your CC and Rs are clear." "My CC and Rs," I replied, "say nothing about the driveway being common property. They define permanent additions, sheds, fences, patios. This is a movable cabinet on my driveway. Not a structure." "So you're arguing semantics," she said, eyes narrowing. "It's an unapproved exterior installation. You need an ARC request." My wife stepped forward, calm but firm. "We read the documents," she said. "There's no rule prohibiting a small, movable cabinet. And the architectural committee approvals are for permanent alterations. We don't think this qualifies." The woman crossed her arms tighter, posture sharpening. "It qualifies if I say it qualifies. We've had complaints." I looked down the street instinctively. A neighbor 2 houses away looked quickly away, suddenly fascinated with their bougainvillea. "From who?" I asked. "Confidential," she said. "That's how complaints work. We don't name names. But we do enforce standards. And this little cupboard is not part of the community aesthetic." She said, "cupboard," like it was a slur. I took a breath and counted to 3. With respect, a community library is about as community-minded as it gets. It doesn't block the sidewalk. It doesn't impede traffic. It's clean, sturdy, and well-maintained. People have been using it, happily. "That may be," she said, "but precedent matters. Today it's a library. Tomorrow it's a plant stand, a bench, a sculpture, a box of free, whatever. We have rules to prevent clutter, hazards, and," she made a small grimace, "visual noise." "Visual noise," I repeated, glancing at the row of identical beige mailboxes and HOA-approved River Rock. "Right." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a clipboard with a printed form. You need to submit an architectural review application. Photos, dimensions, materials, proposed location. We'll take it to the committee. And then? I asked. We wait months to hear that a child's book box isn't aligned with the approved shade of stucco? She tilted her head. We meet monthly. My wife's jaw tightened. Is there an immediate violation? The woman wet her lips. Consider this your verbal notice. Remove the item now to avoid a formal citation. On what basis? I pressed. Show me the clause that says a movable cabinet in a private driveway is prohibited or that the driveway is a common area. She raised a finger, then let it fall when she realized she hadn't brought the documents. It's in there, she said vaguely. Under exterior modifications and use of common areas. I folded my arms, matching her stance without meaning to. I'll pull the CC&Rs and look. If it's there, I'll comply. If not, I'd like you to cite the exact section before escalating. Her eyes flashed. You're welcome to look, she said, putting air quotes around the word as if I'd threatened to consult a grimoire. But you're expected to remove it until approval. Expected by whom? My wife asked. By the architectural committee, she answered, already turning back toward her SUV. We don't make a habit of debating infractions in driveways. Submit the application or take it inside. Either way, I'll be noting this. Noting what? I said. Unapproved exterior item visible from the street, she replied. And potential safety hazard. That one startled me. Safety hazard? In the event of emergency access, she said smoothly. Or if it attracts loitering. Loitering, I repeated. For books. She offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. You'd be surprised what people loiter for. My wife exhaled slowly, visibly reining herself in. We'll review the CC&Rs, she said. Thank you. The woman adjusted her sunglasses, even though the sun was nearly gone. Do that, she said, and climbed into the SUV. As she drove away, she rolled the window down enough to say, "Oh, and do not place signage. Signage requires approval." The SUV turned the corner, taillights stitching red down the block. I stood there with the cabinet, suddenly less a sweet neighborhood gesture and more a contested object. The porch light clicked on behind me. Somewhere, a sprinkler sputtered to life with a tired hiss. My wife put a hand on my arm. Let's bring it in, she said softly. Just for now. I wanted to resist. I wanted to say no, to dare the committee to send me a letter so I could frame it as Exhibit A, but a deeper instinct. One that had learned to avoid HOA skirmishes, won out. We lifted the cabinet and rolled it back into the garage, the wheels thudding softly over the concrete lip. It left a rectangle of darker pavement behind, as if the driveway missed it already. Inside, I stared at the glass door and the neatly arranged spines, the children's books, the mysteries, the poetry. Behind them, a smudge of my reflection looked back, tired, annoyed, a little heartsick. My wife flipped the garage light off and on, testing how the cabinet looked in the dim. What if we keep it here for now? She said, pointing to the front edge of the garage. Door down to a small gap, 24 inches or less. The CC&Rs say it's technically considered closed. People could still reach in and grab a book. I blinked. You're serious? She nodded. It's not ideal, but it keeps the spirit of the thing. And it takes the target off our backs while we figure out the legal part. I crouched, eyeing the bottom of the garage door track and the rubber sweep that met the ground. We could put a little hand-lettered, "Little Free Library" sign just inside the threshold, I said, so it's visible under the gap. Would signage be considered signage? She asked, wincing. If it's inside the garage, I said slowly, maybe it's decor. We both laughed at that. Tired, reluctant laughter, the kind that shows up when you need it to keep from growling. I'll read the documents tonight, I said. All of them. Good, she replied. I'll make tea. We left the cabinet near the garage threshold and closed the door until the gap was a bare hand's breadth. From the sidewalk you could see the sliver of wood and glass, and, if you crouched, a glimpse of book spines. It felt a little like we were smuggling literature. Inside, I spread the CC&Rs across the kitchen island like a map before a voyage. The familiar sections stared back: use restrictions, architectural control, signs, nuisances, common areas, easements. There was the predictable wuthering heights of legalese, heretofore, therein, pursuant to, equitable relief, stacked in tidy paragraphs. I hunted for any line that said driveway equals common area. Nothing. Common area was defined as the private park, the community pool deck, greenbelts, pathways, the entrance monument, and certain utility easements. The streets were owned by the association. The sidewalks were public easements. But driveways? Driveways were parts of individual lots, subject to use restrictions but not owned by the HOA. There were rules about parking, fluids, noise. But not ownership. I skimmed architectural control. It covered structures, fences, walls, landscaping, and exterior alterations. A structure was defined as any building or edifice affixed to the lot. Landscaping included trees, shrubs, turf. There were paragraphs on paint colors and roofing materials, a sonnet to stucco. But nowhere did it say that a movable cabinet placed temporarily on a driveway was an addition. I highlighted the definitions, wrote notes in the margins. Driveway not listed as common area. Structure equals affixed, LFL is movable. Signage permitted only with approval on exterior. What about inside garage? Use restrictions, no nuisances. What is a nuisance? Sigh. It always comes back to that word, nuisance. The rubber clause. The one that can be stretched to cover anything you don't like, from wind chimes to kindness. My phone buzzed. A text from our neighbor, Priya, the one who served on the architectural committee and had a reputation for being reasonable. Heard you had a visit. I'm sorry. I wasn't part of that decision. I like the library. Let's talk. I called her immediately. Thank you for reaching out, I said. We brought it into the garage for now. I heard, she replied, voice warm with sympathy. Listen, I think the cabinet is wonderful. I've been trying to push for small community enhancements, but not everyone agrees. Some people see anything new as a threat to uniformity. She said the driveway is a common area, I told her. Priya sighed. It isn't. Not in our documents. We can regulate use, like no oil spills, no blocking sidewalks, but it's not owned by the association. What about this being an addition? An addition has to be affixed, she said. Nailed, bolted, built. Yours isn't. It's a movable piece. Now, they can argue aesthetics or nuisance, but that's squishier. It depends on the board. So what are our options? I asked. You could submit an ARC request and fight it from inside the process, she said. Or you could relocate it somewhere less provocative. I actually have an idea. Go on, I said. The common pool area, she replied. I could champion it there. But the board will want it to match the community look. Post-mounted, weatherproof, WA beige or coastal blue, branded decal. It would mean buying a different box and painting it. There's a chance we could get a small budget, but I can't promise. Aesthetic committees love to have opinions. I'll be honest, I said. I love our cabinet. It's wood, glass. It has a soul. I don't want to replace it with a corporate-looking birdhouse. I get that, she said softly. The other compromise is what you're doing. Inside the garage, doors cracked open. CC&Rs say 24 inches or less counts as closed. It's a loophole, but a decent one. I smiled despite myself. Smuggling literature. Exactly, she said, laughing. Look, let me float the pool idea informally, see what the temperature is. Meanwhile, document everything. If they send you anything in writing, respond politely and ask them to cite the exact section. Don't give them an excuse to escalate. Thank you, I said. Really? Of course. I'll be in touch. When I hung up, I felt that strange mix of buoyancy and dread that follows every skirmish with authority. On one hand, the text of the CC&Rs was on my side. On the other, the HOA had the tool that never runs out of ink: discretion. We tried the garage solution the next afternoon. I propped the cabinet 2 feet back from the door, set the gap to a clean 24 inches, and taped a small, little free library card just inside, angled toward the light. Within an hour, a pair of kids crouched and peered under the door, giggling. Their mother waved sheepishly at me, and I waved back. The girl reached her small arm inside, opened the glass, and selected a book with the care of a curator. The magic survived the compromise. Still, that evening, as the sky muted and porch lights flicked on, I kept glancing at the empty rectangle on the driveway where the cabinet had stood. The place felt quieter, safer, smaller. I caught my reflection in the garage window, hair tousled, notes still tucked in my shirt pocket, and realized the fight wasn't about a box full of paper. It was about who gets to decide what human looks like on a street designed to be flawless. And whether a neighborhood's soul has room for a little cabinet with a glass door. That night, after Priya's call, I sat hunched over the CC&Rs like a student cramming for an exam he never signed up for. The dense, legalistic paragraphs sprawled across the pages, indifferent to my need for clarity. Every few lines, I scribbled in the margins with a yellow highlighter at the ready. What does this mean in plain English? The section on common areas was my first stop. It was clear enough. Parks, pool, pathways, landscaping strips, the entrance monument, utility easements. The driveways weren't mentioned once. Not even in a footnote. Next, I combed through architectural control. Words like additions, structures, improvements appeared like weeds, but each came tethered to a definition. Something affixed, nailed, bolted, permanently altering the lot. My little wooden cabinet, wheeled in and out of the garage on a whim, fit none of those definitions. Finally, I checked use restrictions. That was where the slippery words lived. Nuisance, eyesore, offensive to community standards, the HOA's favorite catch-all category. Anything they didn't like could be shoehorned into one of those words. A wind chime too tinkly? A nuisance. A garden gnome? Offensive. A book cabinet? Visual noise. I exhaled heavily, rubbing my temples. My wife leaned against the counter, sipping tea. So? She asked. So far, I said, driveways are not common areas. And our cabinet isn't an addition. It's not affixed to anything. If this were court, I'd feel pretty good. But this isn't court, she reminded me gently. It's the HOA, their court, their definitions. I closed the binder with a thud. She was right. Blank, underscore, blank. The next morning, I took a slow walk through the neighborhood. Partly to clear my head, partly to observe. I noticed a plastic basketball hoop, faded by the sun, standing in another driveway. No ARC request had ever been filed for that, I was sure. A neighbor across the street had a large planter, technically furniture, by their garage door. Another house had a metal bench nestled against the edge of their driveway, a convenient spot to rest while waiting for ride shares. None of it was approved. None of it had been declared visual noise. I snapped a few discreet photos with my phone, feeling a little like a spy. Halfway down the block, Carl, retired, silver-haired, always in a golf shirt, was sweeping his driveway. He waved me over. Heard you had a run-in, he said knowingly. That obvious? I muttered. He leaned on his broom. Word gets around fast in these parts. Architectural lady stopped by, huh? Stopped by and told me the driveway is a common area, I said. Told me to take the library inside. Carl laughed, shaking his head. Common area? That's a stretch. My buddy fought them on a basketball hoop once. He won. Driveway's part of the lot. They just like to test how far they can push. I read the CC in ours last night, I said. She's wrong. She knows she's wrong, Carl said. But they count on people not wanting the fight. Most folks fold. That landed heavier than I expected. Was I going to fold? Blank. Blank. Later that day, Maria from across the street walked over with a bag of lemons from her tree. She lingered, eyes flicking toward the garage where the cabinet now lived in shadow. I miss it already, she said softly. Me too, I admitted. Apparently it's a nuisance. Maria snorted. A nuisance? My neighbor's leaf blower is a nuisance. Your library is delightful. She handed me the bag of lemons. Don't let them scare you off. Half this neighborhood thinks the board is too strict. We just don't always say it out loud. Her words stuck with me long after she left. Don't let them scare you off. Blank. That evening, I laid out the options with my wife like cards on a table. Option 1. Do nothing. Put the cabinet back. Risky, of course. If they sent a violation, we could fight it. But then the fines could pile up. $50 a day, $100 a day. It was always escalating. We could end up sinking money into principal. Option 2. Garage loophole. Keep the cabinet near the door, gap open 24 inches or less. Technically closed, technically compliant, technically hidden enough to dodge a fight. But also awkward. Did we really want to crouch like smugglers to grab books? Option 3. Gated front yard. Safer, since it's our private space, but less visible. It would lose its magic if tucked behind iron bars, visible only to those who knew where to look. A secret library is still a library, but not the one I envisioned. Option 4. Work with the board. Submit the ARC request, swallow the process, maybe even move the library to the pool area like Priya suggested. But that meant new expenses, new rules, and relinquishing the cabinet I'd poured effort into. Would they even approve it in the end? Option 5. Something else. Fight, petition, rally neighbors, take photos of all the other violations, and demand consistency. Shine a light on selective enforcement. Each option had its own weight. Each carried its own risks. Blank. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the committee woman's words in my head. We've had complaints. Had we really? Or was it just her? Maybe one cranky neighbor? Maybe none at all? It didn't matter. All it took was the claim of a complaint to turn kindness into violation. The thought gnawed at me. What kind of community punishes a box of books? What kind of organization fears people loitering over literature? I stared at the ceiling, the faint glow of the street lamp seeping through the blinds. It's not about the cabinet, I whispered to myself. It's about control. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which path to choose: compliance, compromise, or confrontation. But I knew one thing: this wasn't over. The cabinet sat quietly in the garage, wood gleaming under the fluorescent light, as if waiting for its next assignment. Every time I walked past it, carrying groceries, hauling laundry, grabbing tools, I felt it staring back, patient but wounded. It belonged out there, in the open, where children's hands could tug open its glass door. Instead, it was exiled, silenced behind the garage door like contraband. I decided it was time to list out the options again, this time in sharper detail. I grabbed a yellow legal pad and wrote them down, one by one, with bullet points under each. Blank. Option 1. Put it back in the driveway. Pros. Visible, accessible, keeps the original spirit alive. Cons. Risk of formal violation, escalating fines, possible legal mess. This was the bold move, the defiant stand. A voice inside me whispered, "This is your property. Your driveway. They can't just make rules up." But another voice, colder, reminded me, "They can send letters. They can fine you. They can wear you down until you cave anyway." Blank. Underscore, blank, option 2. The garage loophole. Pros. Technically compliant, avoids direct confrontation, still somewhat usable. Cons. Awkward access, loses spontaneity, feels like hiding. The loophole had charm in its own way. Kids crouching under the garage door gap, arms reaching for books like adventurers grabbing treasure through a cave opening. But it was clumsy, impractical. The magic of the library was that it invited people openly, without barriers. A half-closed garage was a compromise, but compromises taste like diluted coffee, lukewarm, unsatisfying. Blank. Underscore, blank, option 3. Move it into the gated yard. Pros. Fully private, undisputable ownership. Cons. Hidden from casual passers-by, reduced traffic, loses its purpose. I pictured the cabinet behind our wrought iron gate, visible only if you squinted through the bars. It would still exist, still hold books, but stripped of its accessibility. Who would walk up to someone's gate, crane their neck, and then ask permission? The entire spirit of Little Free Library was in its openness. A gated library was an oxymoron. Blank. Underscore, blank, option 4. Work with the board. Pros. Legitimacy, permanence, maybe even support or funding. Cons. Slow process, aesthetic demands, cost, risk of denial. Priya's suggestion, moving it to the pool area, was tempting. It would be public, visible, maybe even officially blessed by the HOA. But the price was steep. A new box, in approved colors, painted to match some committee's vision of coastal charm. Our sturdy wood and glass cabinet would be discarded like a beloved toy replaced with a plastic imitation. And what if, after the expense, they still said no? Blank. Underscore, blank, option 5. Fight. Pros. Stand up for principle, expose selective enforcement, maybe rally neighbors. Cons. Exhausting, divisive, potential retaliation. This option kept tugging at me. Walking the neighborhood, I'd cataloged infractions no one seemed to care about. Planters, benches, basketball hoops, even a lawn sign that had been out months past election season. Selective enforcement was everywhere. If they wanted to call my cabinet a nuisance, then consistency demanded they call out every planter, every bench, every plastic playset too. But I knew where this road led. Letters, hearings, maybe even lawyers. A full-on war with the HOA. Blank. Underscore, blank. I stared at the list, tapping my pen against the page. None of the options felt clean. All of them required sacrifice, visibility, freedom, money, energy. The library was suddenly heavier than it looked. Blank. Underscore, blank. That evening, I called Priya again. "I've been thinking through the pool area idea," I told her. She sounded hopeful. "Yes? I think it could work. We'd need to present it properly, but I could shepherd it." "What would it take?" I asked. "Well, the committee would want a post-mounted box, like the ones you see online," she said. "Painted in HOA-approved colors. Likely beige or coastal blue, with white trim. It should be weatherproof, and ideally match the architecture of the pool cabana." I rubbed my forehead. "So, a mini version of the clubhouse." She chuckled. "Basically. And we'd need a contractor to install it, or at least someone handy who can make it look professional. If we present it as a community enhancement, there's a chance we could get the board to cover some of the cost. And if not, then it would fall to you. A few $100s, maybe more, depending on the build." I glanced toward the garage, where my cabinet sat quietly. But then my cabinet, my beautiful cabinet, stays in exile. I know, she said gently. But sometimes compromise is the only way forward. Blank, underscore, blank. After we hung up, I sat with my wife on the porch, list in hand. So what do you think? I asked. She studied the paper, then looked up at me. What do you want? I want it back in the driveway, I said immediately. That's where it belongs. But, she prompted, but I don't want to risk escalating fines. I don't want us to become the difficult family the HOA targets every time they patrol. She nodded. I get it, but I also know you. This library means more to you than just books. It's about community, about pushing back against the sameness. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the rows of nearly identical houses glowing under the setting sun. Exactly. It's not just wood and glass. It's soul. She smiled faintly. Then maybe it's worth fighting for. Blank, underscore, blank. That night, I dreamed of the library as if it were alive. A small, glowing box standing bravely at the edge of the driveway while faceless HOA inspectors circled with clipboards. Neighbors gathered around it, shielding it, laughing, swapping books like contraband currency. In the dream, the cabinet looked taller, prouder, as if fed by the very act of defiance. When I woke, the image stayed with me. I realized then that the fight wasn't just about location or legality. It was about dignity. If I gave in quietly, the message would be clear: initiative dies under bureaucracy. But if I stood up, calmly, firmly, I might remind the neighborhood that not every rule deserves blind obedience. The library wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a symbol. The HOA meeting took place in the same beige-walled clubhouse where birthdays and baby showers were sometimes held, though tonight the folding chairs and fluorescent lights stripped it of any festivity. I walked in with my wife, the legal pad tucked under my arm like a shield. The cabinet, the library, wasn't physically here, but its presence pressed down on me all the same, heavy and insistent. Neighbors were scattered across the rows. Some wore expressions of boredom, others curiosity. A few nodded at me knowingly. Priya, seated at the table with the other committee members, gave me a small, encouraging smile. Beside her sat the woman who had confronted me in the driveway, her lips already tight, as though she had been practicing disapproval in the mirror. The president of the HOA, a tall man in a linen blazer, tapped the microphone. Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. The first 20 minutes dragged with budget reports, landscaping contracts, and pool maintenance schedules. My leg jiggled under the chair. My wife squeezed my hand to still it. Then came the agenda item I'd been waiting for: violations and unapproved modifications. The property manager, a middle-aged man with reading glasses, cleared his throat. First item: unapproved structure placed on driveway at my address. Heads turned. Murmurs rippled. The woman from the committee sat straighter, ready. The president nodded. We'll hear from the architectural committee first. She launched into her case. A wooden cabinet was placed on the driveway, visible from the street. It was being used as a so-called little free library. No application was submitted to the committee. As such, it is an unapproved addition, placed on what qualifies as a common aesthetic area. Residents complained. I visited personally and advised the homeowner to remove it until proper approval is granted. I almost laughed at so-called. She made a box of books sound like a nuclear device. The president looked to the rest of the table. Comments from the committee? Priya leaned forward, her voice calm but steady. With respect, I disagree. Our CC and Rs define common area very specifically. Driveways are not listed. They belong to the lot. The only restrictions apply to nuisances and maintenance. The library in question is movable, not affixed, and therefore not an addition under our definitions. The woman glared at her. It's an exterior modification. Visible. It alters the streetscape. It's no more permanent than a basketball hoop or a planter, Priya replied. And we have dozens of those. The president raised a hand. Let's keep this civil. I understand the homeowner is here. Would you like to speak? I rose, my heart pounding, but my voice steadier than I expected. Yes, thank you. My name is, and I live at, address. I placed a small wooden cabinet at the edge of my driveway to serve as a little free library. It's sturdy, clean, and stocked with books for neighbors to share. In the weeks it stood there, children and adults alike used it. It created conversation. It built community. I held up my highlighted CC and Rs. I have reviewed our governing documents thoroughly. Driveways are not designated as common areas. Additions are defined as permanent, affixed structures. This cabinet was movable. It does not qualify. Murmurs rose behind me. Agreement, whispers of, true, and, he's right. I pressed on. If the concern is aesthetics, then let us be consistent. Basketball hoops, benches, planters, even seasonal decor. None have required ARC approval, yet they remain visible every day. Why is this cabinet singled out? The room buzzed louder. The woman from the committee interjected sharply, because it sets a precedent. If we allow this, we must allow anything. Tomorrow, 10 people could set up boxes, stands, kiosks. We'll have chaos. Someone from the audience chuckled. Chaos? Over free books? A ripple of laughter followed. The president rapped his gavel lightly. Order, please. I looked directly at the board. I am not here to cause trouble. I am here because this matters. This isn't just about a wooden cabinet. It's about what kind of neighborhood we want to be. One where small acts of kindness are punished, or one where they're encouraged. We speak of community, yet the moment someone tries to foster it, we call it a nuisance. For a moment, silence. The words hung in the fluorescent air like a dare. Blank, underscore, blank. The debate unfolded like a courtroom drama. One board member frowned thoughtfully. Do we have actual written complaints from residents, or just committee concerns? The property manager hesitated. I believe there were informal comments. In other words, none in writing, Priya said smoothly. The woman flushed. I was told directly. But no official complaint forms? The board member pressed. She pursed her lips and said nothing. Another member, a bespectacled man with an accountant's precision, asked, what about liability? Could someone get hurt using the cabinet? Priya countered. By that logic, benches, basketball hoops, even yard sales carry liability. We accept those risks because they're part of normal neighborhood life. The accountant nodded slowly, conceding the point. The room's mood was shifting. I could feel it, sympathy building, the absurdity of the objection dawning on more faces. Finally, the president leaned back, folding his arms. Here's what I propose. We vote on 2 motions. 1. Whether this specific item constitutes a violation, and 2. Whether we establish guidelines for future items of this nature. The woman stiffened. I object. That undermines our authority. No, Priya said quietly, it clarifies it. Blank, underscore, blank, the vote began. All in favor of declaring the Little Free Library a violation? The president asked. The woman's hand shot up. Slowly, uncertainly, the accountant raised his 2. All opposed? 4 hands rose immediately. Priya's, the thoughtful board member, another younger woman at the end, and finally the president himself. 4-2. The violation failed. A murmur of relief and applause broke out among the audience. I exhaled deeply, tension draining like water from a cracked dam. The president rapped the gavel. Motion fails. The cabinet does not constitute a violation as currently defined. He paused, then added, but we will now discuss guidelines for similar future items. Blank, underscore, blank. The guidelines discussion was a blur. Talk of size limits, placement, materials. Some wanted strict rules, others preferred flexibility. I listened, half-dazed, still processing the victory. At one point, the president glanced at me. Would you be willing to relocate the library to a common area, like the pool deck, if funding were available for a new structure? I considered, then shook my head gently. I appreciate the offer, but this cabinet is part of the project. It's not junk, it's polished wood, with a glass door. It has character. If the community wants more libraries, wonderful. But this one belongs in my driveway. More murmurs, nods of agreement. The president nodded. Fair enough. And just like that, the battle was over. Blank. Blank. When the meeting adjourned, neighbors came up to shake my hand. Maria beamed. You spoke beautifully, she said. They needed to hear it. Carl clapped me on the shoulder. 4-2. Not bad odds. You gave them something to chew on. Even the bespectacled accountant gave me a small, sheepish nod as he passed. The only one who avoided me entirely was the woman from the committee. She gathered her papers stiffly and swept out without a glance. My wife squeezed my hand as we walked into the night air. The stars above California shimmered faintly, half swallowed by suburban street lamps. The cabinet still waited in the garage, but soon it would return to its rightful place. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood felt like home again. The next morning, the sun rose bright and merciless, pouring heat onto the sidewalks. By 9 a.m. I opened the garage door, and there it was. The cabinet, waiting. I touched its smooth wooden side as though greeting an old friend. Last night, it had been a symbol in debate. Today, it would return to being what it was meant to be, a home for books, a spark for connection. My wife and I rolled it carefully back onto the driveway. The wheels thudded gently over the concrete seam, and suddenly the rectangle of darker pavement was filled again, as if the driveway had been holding its breath. I adjusted the angle so the glass caught the light just right, then stepped back. Looks better already, she said softly. It did. The street looked alive again, as if something essential had returned. Blank. By the afternoon, the first visitors came. A boy on a scooter stopped, crouched, and peered in. He pulled out a graphic novel, flipped through it, then tucked it under his arm before scooting off. A woman walking her dog paused, opened the glass door, and exchanged a cookbook for a gardening magazine. I watched discreetly from the porch, a grin spreading across my face. The library was back, and it hadn't lost its charm. If anything, the meeting had made it more famous. Over the next week, more neighbors stopped by than ever before. Carl dropped off a stack of westerns. Maria contributed a book of poetry. Even the teenagers who usually sped by on bikes slowed down to rummage through the shelves, pretending to be aloof but clearly curious. One evening, I overheard a little girl tugging her mother's sleeve. Can we check the library today? The mother smiled and said, of course. The girl's joy as she opened the door, choosing a brightly illustrated storybook, nearly made my chest ache. Blank. The library became a landmark. People began using it as a meeting spot. I'll meet you by the library, or as a casual marker when giving directions. We're 2 houses down from the free book box. And for me, it was proof. Proof that one small act, one modest piece of wood and glass, could shift the culture of a neighborhood. Proof that not everything had to be uniform beige to belong. Of course, not everyone was happy. The woman from the committee still passed by in her white SUV from time to time, slowing just enough to glare. But she never stopped, never rolled down the window. Maybe she knew the vote had settled the matter. Or maybe she was waiting for the smallest excuse to pounce again. Either way, I had decided, I wouldn't flinch. If a letter came, I would respond with calm logic, citing the CC and Rs. If fines appeared, I would appeal, armed with consistency and precedent. I had learned something vital. HOAs thrive on silence and fear. But the moment you stand up, the moment you shine a light on absurdity, the whole facade begins to crack. Blank, underscore, blank, one Saturday evening, Priya stopped by. She stood admiring the library, running her hand over the polished wood. "I'm glad it's back," she said. "It belongs here." "Thanks to you," I said. She shook her head. "Thanks to you. You showed up. You spoke. Most people never do. That's why the board thinks they can get away with stretching definitions. But you pushed back, and you won." I thought about that as we chatted about books, about community, about how rules can either bind or support. When she left, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of pink and orange. The library stood at the end of the driveway, glowing faintly in the fading light, spines catching the last rays. It looked, in that moment, almost heroic. Blank, underscore, blank, weeks turned into months, and the library remained. It weathered the summer heat, the occasional drizzle, the endless scrutiny of HOA patrols. But it thrived, too. The shelves changed daily, romance novels appeared, mysteries vanished, children's books circulated. Someone even left a journal with a note inside. "Write a thought, leave a thought." Pages began to fill with scribbles, poems, quotes. It wasn't just a library anymore. It was a conversation. And every time I saw someone pause, kneel, open the glass door, and smile, I remembered that first confrontation. The woman standing stiff in my driveway, declaring the library an offense. And I smiled, because she had been wrong. Blank, underscore, blank, one night, I reflected with my wife. "You know what strikes me?" I asked. She tilted her head. "What?" "That they tried to frame it as a violation. A nuisance. Something ugly. But look at it now. It's the most beautiful thing on the street." She smiled softly. "Sometimes beauty scares people more than ugliness. Because it changes things." Her words sank deep. Blank, underscore, blank, I began to see the library not just as a cabinet but as a mirror. It reflected the neighborhood back to itself. Some saw clutter, others saw connection. Some saw rules violated, others saw community enriched. And in that reflection lay the real battle. Not about wood or glass, not about clauses in the CC&Rs, but about the soul of suburban life. Was it about uniform lawns and silent compliance? Or was it about people, messy, curious, human, finding ways to connect? Blank, underscore, blank, months later, at another HOA meeting, the topic of community enhancements came up. To my surprise, the president referenced the library. Despite initial concerns, he said carefully, "The little free library has become a positive fixture. Perhaps we should consider encouraging more of these, within reasonable guidelines." The irony made me chuckle. The very thing they had tried to squash was now a model for improvement. Blank, underscore, blank, I know battles with HOAs never truly end. There will be new letters, new rules, new conflicts. But the library taught me something I won't forget. Even in the most rigid of places, even under the most suffocating of rules, a spark of humanity can push through. It may face resistance. It may be called a nuisance. But if it's true, if it's real, it will survive. I looked at the cabinet one last time before bed that night. Books exchanged, doors closing softly, neighbors waving as they passed. A piece of wood, glass, and paper, yet somehow more alive than any rulebook could ever be. And I thought, let them write their notices, let them clutch their clipboards. This library will outlast them all.
Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Have you ever dealt with something this absurd in your own neighborhood? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode.